The morning mist clung to the crystalline spires of Prime like ghostly fingers, reluctant to release their grip on the alien architecture. Commander of the Galactic Enforcement Division stepped carefully around the Memorial Plaza, his four eyes scanning the geometric patterns etched into the translucent monument. The War Memorial stood 30 meters high, its surface reflecting the pale binary suns that cast long shadows across the polished stone floor. Something was wrong, again. For the third time in as many cycles, someone had left offerings at the base of the memorial. Not the traditional energy crystals or data cores that bereaved families typically brought to honor their fallen warriors. These were different, strange, primitive even. Knelt beside the latest edition, his chitinous fingers hovering over a small bundle wrapped in what appeared to be organic fabric. The material was rough, clearly hand-woven, and bore traces of chemical compounds his scanner couldn't immediately identify. Beside it lay a small metallic cylinder and what looked like dried vegetation arranged in a careful pattern. "Sir," Lieutenant approached from behind, her mandibles clicking nervously. "The security footage from last night shows the same anomalous readings. No visual confirmation of the perpetrator." Stood, his exoskeleton creaking softly in the morning air. The Prime War Memorial was one of the most heavily monitored sites in this sector of the galaxy. It honored the brave soldiers who had fallen during the brutal conflict with the human insurgency 3 standard years ago. The humans had been driven from this system, their terrorist cells scattered to the void, but the scars remained fresh in every mind. "Show me the recordings again," he commanded, following toward the monitoring station. The holographic display shimmered to life, showing the Memorial Plaza in the deep purple hues of Prime's night cycle. For several minutes, nothing moved except the automated maintenance drones that kept the memorial pristine. Then, at precisely 3:47 hours, the sensors detected a localized distortion. There, pointed with one of her secondary arms. The atmospheric readings spike, temperature drops by 3 degrees, and then the bundle appeared, not carried by visible hands, not dropped from above. It simply materialized at the base of the memorial, as if the fabric of space itself had folded to deliver it. "Teleportation technology," mused, but his tone carried doubt. The humans had never demonstrated such capabilities during the war. Their technology was crude, mechanical, based on primitive combustion and electromagnetic principles. They barely understood faster-than-light travel, let alone personal teleportation. "Perhaps a remaining human sympathizer among the other species," suggested. "They have been known to." "No," cut her off with a sharp gesture. "The technology signatures are distinct. This is something else entirely." He studied the mysterious bundle again through the display. The organic fabric showed where patterns consistent with long use, and the dried vegetation included several species that his botanical database couldn't identify. Most puzzling of all was the metallic cylinder. Initial scans suggested it contained some form of preserved organic matter, but the container's composition easy categorization. "Have you opened it?" he asked. His mandibles clicked again, a sign of discomfort. "We thought it best to wait for your authorization, given the location's significance." Understood her hesitation. The memorial wasn't just a monument to the dead, it was a symbol of resilience. During the human uprising, terrorist attacks had targeted civilian populations, supply lines, and cultural sites across 17 worlds. The humans fought without honor, using guerrilla tactics and showing no respect for the established rules of civilized warfare. They had eventually triumphed through superior technology and organization, but the cost had been tremendous. Over 2 million soldiers had died bringing peace to the sector, and the memorial bore the names of every fallen warrior etched into its crystalline surface. "Open it," decided, "but take full precautions." The forensics team arrived within the hour, their equipment scanning the bundle from every conceivable angle before carefully unwrapping the organic fabric. Inside, they found items that immediate explanation. A small vial of clear liquid that analysis revealed to be distilled ethanol mixed with trace minerals. Several pieces of what appeared to be confectionery, wrapped in primitive polymer films. A collection of small metal discs bearing engravings in an unfamiliar script. And most mysteriously, a folded piece of organic paper covered in handwritten symbols. "The script is definitely human," announced Dr. The Expeditions. She had spent years studying captured human communications during the war. But the dialect is archaic, predating their expansion into space by several centuries. Examine the paper through the containment field. The markings were crude but deliberate, made with some form of carbon-based writing implement. Can you translate it? Doctor's compound eyes focused intently on the symbols. It appears to be a form of poetry or ritualistic text, something about remembrance, honor. The phrasing is highly metaphorical. She paused, her mandibles working silently as she processed the translation. There's a recurring phrase that roughly translates to "they shall not grow old," or perhaps "they remain eternal." A memorial text, observed. But why would humans leave remembrance offerings at a war memorial? The question hung in the air like the morning mist, equally ethereal and equally persistent. Had fought in the human conflict himself, leading a battalion during the siege of Station. He had seen firsthand the humans' capacity for both savagery and surprising tactical innovation. But this suggested something entirely different. Perhaps it's psychological warfare, he theorized. A delayed tactic designed to unsettle us, to make us question our victory. But even as he spoke the words, they felt hollow. The items in the bundle carried no threat, no hidden danger. They felt almost reverent. The metallic cylinder proved even more puzzling when opened. Inside, the preservation matrix held what appeared to be soil samples from dozens of different worlds. Each sample was carefully separated and labeled with the same archaic human script. Translations revealed planet names, many of which didn't appear in any known star charts. "These are grave sites," she announced after hours of painstaking translation work. "Earth locations where human soldiers were buried, but also off-world sites." She pointed to one particular sample. "This one is labeled Vega 7, 3rd Battle, Sector Green, but we have no record of humans ever reaching the Vega system." Felt a chill that had nothing to do with the morning air. The implications were staggering. If humans had developed interstellar capabilities beyond what the intelligence services had detected, if they had fought battles in systems light years from their known territory. "Begin a full investigation," he ordered. "I want every intelligence file from the human conflict reviewed. Cross-reference any mentions of Vega 7 or the other locations on those labels, and increase security around all memorial sites in the sector." As his team dispersed to carry out their orders, remained in the plaza, studying the memorial's crystalline surface. The names of the fallen shimmered in the alien sunlight, each one representing a life cut short by human violence. Yet someone was honoring this place with offerings that spoke of respect, even reverence. The contradiction gnawed at him like a parasite in his neural cortex. Over the following days, the investigation expanded beyond Prime. Reports began filtering in from other memorial sites across the sector. Similar offerings had appeared at monuments on 7 different worlds, always during the night cycle, always with the same mysterious delivery method that left no trace of the bearer. Each bundle contained variations on the same theme: primitive human alcohol, confections, soil samples from distant graves, and handwritten texts in archaic human script. The messages were always respectful, always focused on themes of remembrance and eternal honor. "It's as if," Doctor explained during one briefing, "someone is conducting a memorial service of their own. The items are consistent with ancient human burial customs and remembrance rituals." "But that makes no sense," protested. "Why would humans honor our war dead? They were the aggressors, they started the conflict." Had been wondering the same thing, but a growing suspicion was taking shape in his mind. Something about the timing, the locations, the careful selection of memorial sites. He ordered his staff to compile a comprehensive map of all the affected monuments. The pattern that emerged was troubling. Every targeted memorial commemorated battles where human casualties had been particularly high. Engagements where forces had achieved decisive victories through overwhelming technological superiority. Sites where human troops had been essentially massacred rather than defeated in honorable combat. The Battle of Prime itself had been one such engagement. Human insurgents had attempted to establish a foothold on the planet's 3rd moon, using it as a staging area for raids against civilian shipping. The response had been swift and brutal. Orbital bombardment had eliminated the human position in a matter of hours, leaving no survivors. Or so they had believed. "Pull the casualty reports from these engagements," ordered. "I want a complete accounting of human losses." The data that came back painted a grim picture. In every battle commemorated by the affected memorials, human forces had been completely annihilated. No prisoners taken, no survivors recovered. The military doctrine of the time had prioritized rapid resolution over prisoner management, viewing the human insurgency as a pest problem rather than a legitimate military conflict. "Sir," one of his analysts reported, "there's something else. We've been assuming these offerings are being left by surviving humans, but what if?" "What if what?" "What if they're being left by human spirits? Their cultural database includes extensive references to ancestor worship and posthumous communication." His four eyes focused sharply on the analyst. "You're suggesting supernatural intervention." "I'm suggesting we may be dealing with phenomena beyond our current understanding. The teleportation technology, the untraceable delivery method, the focus on honoring the dead. It's all consistent with human folklore about restless spirits." The idea was absurd, of course. Science had long ago dismissed primitive concepts of life after death. Consciousness was an electrochemical process that ceased when the neural matrix stopped functioning. There were no spirits, no ghosts, no magical forces beyond the comprehensible laws of physics. Yet the evidence continued to accumulate. Motion sensors detected presence without form. Atmospheric disturbances occurred without cause. And always, the bundles appeared with their careful arrangements of remembrance offerings. "I want a full spectral analysis of the next incident," declared. "Deploy every sensor we have. If someone is using advanced technology to create these effects, we'll detect the mechanism." The opportunity came 3 nights later at the station memorial. Himself led the observation team, positioning detection equipment in a perimeter around the monument. Electromagnetic sensors, gravitational field detectors, quantum flux monitors, temporal displacement indicators. Every instrument the Galactic Enforcement Division possessed was focused on the memorial site. At 3:47 hours, exactly the same time as every previous incident, the sensors began registering anomalies. Temperature dropped, atmospheric pressure fluctuated. The electromagnetic spectrum showed distortions that explanation. And then in the center of their sensor net, the bundle materialized. But this time, for just a moment, the infrared sensors detected something else. A humanoid heat signature, faint but unmistakable, kneeling beside the memorial. The figure appeared to be placing items carefully at the base of the monument, moving with deliberate reverence. Then, as quickly as it had appeared, the signature faded. "Did you record that?" demanded. "Yes, sir, but—" The technician's voice carried confusion. "The signature doesn't match any known life form. The temperature was too low, the metabolic indicators too faint. It's almost as if—" "As if what?" "As if we were detecting someone who was mostly dead, but not quite gone." Stared at the memorial, its crystalline surface now reflecting the faint glow of their monitoring equipment. The bundle lay at its base, another careful arrangement of offerings from someone who had no reason to honor war dead. Unless they weren't honoring thee at all. The realization hit him with the force of an orbital bombardment. The archaic human script, the focus on remembrance and eternal honor, the consistent timing and ritual presentation. These weren't offerings for fallen warriors. They were memorial services for dead humans. Someone was using the war memorials as gravesites for human soldiers who had died in the same battles, whose bodies had been vaporized in orbital strikes or lost in the vacuum of space. Someone was ensuring that the human dead received the same honors as their enemies. But who and how? As the twin sons of Prime began their slow rise above the horizon, casting long shadows across the memorial plaza, found himself facing a mystery that challenged everything he thought he knew about the war, the enemy, and the nature of death itself. The investigation was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning. The archives of the Galactic Enforcement Division stretched deep beneath the surface of Prime, their climate-controlled chambers preserving the military records of a dozen conflicts spanning 2 centuries. Commander had spent the past week buried in these digital tombs, searching through classified files and battle reports with a growing sense of unease. What he found challenged everything the military had believed about their war against the human insurgency. The first discrepancy appeared in the casualty reports from the Battle of Station. Official records listed 0 human survivors from the orbital bombardment that had ended the siege. But buried in the personal logs of ship commanders, found mentions of escape pods detected moments before the final strike. Pods that had been dismissed as debris and never pursued. "Lieutenant," he called through the communication grid, "I need you to pull the sensor logs from Task Force 7 during the engagement. Focus on the final bombardment phase." While he waited for the data, continued his excavation of military history. The siege of Rigel Station told a similar story. Official records declared total human annihilation, but intercepted communications mentioned evacuation attempts in the minutes before the installation's destruction. Small craft fleeing into the asteroid field, their signatures lost among the mineral interference. The pattern repeated across every engagement. Humans dying by the thousands, yes, but also humans escaping in small numbers. Scattered survivors fleeing into the void with nothing but basic life support and emergency provisions. "Sir's voice crackled through the comm. "The sensor logs are unusual. There were definitely escape pods, at least 17 of them, but the trajectory analysis shows they were heading into deep space, away from any known systems. Command classified them as non-threats." Non-threats. Mandibles clicked in frustration. Wounded humans fleeing into the darkness between stars, and the military had simply ignored them. Why waste resources chasing scattered refugees when the war could be won through decisive application of superior firepower? But now those refugees were coming back, or something that had once been them. Doctor appeared in the archive entrance, her compound eyes bright with excitement. "Commander, I've made significant progress with the translation work. The texts we've recovered aren't random memorial prayers. They're specific. Each one references battles, dates, unit designations, their honor rolls." She activated her portable display, showing columns of translated human script. "Look at this. Station Defense Force, 3rd Company Gamma Squad. They held the reactor deck until the end. And here, Rigel Mining Consortium Militia, 2nd Battalion. They died buying time for the evacuation convoys." Studied the translations, cross-referencing them with his battle reports. Every unit mentioned had fought in the exact locations where the memorial offerings had appeared. But these weren't units. These were human military designations. "It's like reading the other side of our own war records," Doctor continued. "Every battle we won, every human position we destroyed, someone was keeping track of the defenders, recording their units, their actions, their sacrifice." Someone repeated thoughtfully. "But the question remains, who? These texts are being written now, not during the war. The paper is fresh, the ink recent. Perhaps surviving human historians, refugees who escaped and are now documenting their losses." It was possible, but instincts suggested something more complex. The mysterious delivery method, the spectral heat signatures, the consistent timing of the offerings, all pointed toward something beyond conventional explanation. His contemplation was interrupted by an urgent communication from the orbital monitoring station. "Commander, we have a situation. Long-range sensors are detecting an approaching vessel. Unknown configuration, but the energy signature is consistent with human technology." His 4 eyes widened. No human ships had been detected in space since the war's end. Their fleet had been scattered or destroyed, their manufacturing capability eliminated. "What's the vessel's trajectory?" "Direct approach to Prime, sir. Estimated arrival in 6 hours. Scramble the defense fleet. I want that ship intercepted and boarded before it reaches planetary orbit." "Sir, there's something else. The vessel is transmitting a signal. It's requesting permission to approach the war memorial. The message is in archaic human script, similar to what we've been finding in the bundles." The pieces of the puzzle were beginning to form a picture, but one that rational explanation. Returned to the surface, watching the orbital tracking displays as the mysterious human vessel approached the outer defensive perimeter. The ship itself was unlike any human design in the database. Where human vessels typically relied on angular, utilitarian construction, this craft seemed to flow like liquid metal, its surface reflecting light in patterns that hurt to observe directly. Most disturbing of all, the vessel's energy signature was impossibly faint for something of its apparent size. "Magnify the image," ordered. The display zoomed in, revealing details that made no sense. The ship's hull appeared to be constructed from some form of crystalline material, similar to memorial architecture, but following design principles that belonged to neither species. Strange symbols covered the surface, glowing with soft phosphorescence that pulsed like a heartbeat. "Sir, the vessel has stopped at the system's edge. It's requesting permission to enter." "Send a boarding party to—" "Commander," Doctor interrupted, studying her translation tablet. "The message isn't a request, it's a notification. They're not asking permission. They're informing us that they're coming to honor their dead." Before could respond, the vessel began moving again. But instead of approaching through normal space, it seemed to fold the distance between itself and Prime. One moment it was at the system's edge, the next it was entering planetary orbit. No acceleration, no transition period. It simply relocated itself through space as casually as stepping through a doorway. "How is that possible?" whispered. "It's not," replied, but his conviction was wavering. Everything about this situation challenged his understanding of physics, technology, and the nature of reality itself. The vessel settled into a stable orbit directly above the Memorial Plaza. Close-range sensors revealed even more disturbing details. The ship's internal structure seemed to shift and flow like a living organism. Corridors rearranged themselves, compartments merged and divided, and the energy signature continued to pulse with that steady, heartbeat-like rhythm. "Commander," the communications officer announced, "we're receiving a transmission from the vessel. Audio only, but the voice is unusual." "Put it through." The speaker crackled to life, and a human voice filled the command center. But it was wrong somehow. Too hollow, too distant, as if the speaker was calling from the bottom of a deep well. "Forces," the voice said, each word carrying the weight of infinite sadness. "We come in peace. We come to complete our duty. Our fallen deserve to be remembered." "Who are you?" demanded. "Identify yourself." "We are the Vigil," came the reply. "We are those who could not rest until our brothers and sisters received proper honors. We are the price of survival." Doctor was working frantically with her translation equipment, cross-referencing the human words with her expanding database. "Commander," she said urgently, "the word they're using for vigil has multiple meanings in human culture. It can mean a watchful waiting, but it can also refer to the act of staying awake with the dead." The communications channel crackled again. "Permission to send a representative to the Memorial Plaza. We bring no weapons, seek no conflict. We wish only to honor those who fell defending their comrades." Faced an impossible decision. Every protocol demanded that he deny the request, that he treat this as a potential terrorist infiltration. But something about the voice, about the reverent tone and the obvious grief it carried, gave him pause. "Sir warned, this could be a trap, some form of delayed revenge attack." "Perhaps," acknowledged. "But if they wanted to attack, why request permission? Why approach openly? Their technology is clearly superior to ours. They could have struck without warning." He opened the communication channel. "You may send one representative. Any aggressive action will result in immediate defensive response." "Understood," the voice replied, "and thank you." Within minutes, a small craft detached from the mysterious vessel. Like its parent ship, the Shuttle Easy categorization. It descended through the atmosphere without visible propulsion, landing softly in the Memorial Plaza as if guided by invisible hands. And his security team took positions around the plaza, weapons ready but not actively targeting the newcomer. The shuttle's hatch opened with a soft hiss, and a figure emerged. At first glance, it appeared human, male, middle-aged, wearing what looked like a simple military uniform. But as the figure moved closer, the illusion began to break down. His movements were too fluid, too precise. His skin had a translucent quality that suggested he was not entirely present in the physical world. Most unsettling of all were his eyes. They held the depth of space itself, filled with starlight and cosmic darkness. When he looked at, the commander felt as if he was being examined by the universe itself. "Thank you for allowing me to complete my mission," the figure said, his voice carrying the same hollow quality as the ship-to-ship transmission. "I am Sergeant, formerly of the Station Defense Force. I have been searching for this place for a long time." Doctor consulted her database frantically. "Sergeant," she announced, "listed as killed in action during the final bombardment of Station. No body recovered." The figure that called itself smiled sadly. "Bodies are not always necessary for continuation of duty. My squad died defending the reactor core. They bought time for 17 escape pods to reach minimum safe distance before the orbital strike. Those pods carried 312 souls to safety." "But you died," said, struggling to maintain his composure. "Our sensors detected no human survivors." "Death is not always an ending," replied, walking slowly toward the memorial. "Sometimes it is a transformation. My body died in the reactor explosion, yes, but my duty remained incomplete. How could I rest when my fallen brothers and sisters lay unhonored?" He knelt at the base of the crystalline monument, placing a familiar bundle beside the previous offerings. This one contained the same elements as all the others: alcohol, soil samples, memorial texts. But also something new, a small metal disc bearing engravings that seemed to shift and flow like liquid. "This memorial honors brave warriors," said quietly. "But this space also holds the blood of human defenders. 57 members of my unit died in this system. They deserve to be remembered alongside your own fallen." Found himself unable to speak. The figure before him radiated such profound grief and determination that it seemed to bend reality around it. Whatever had become, whatever force kept him functioning beyond death, it was driven by an unbreakable commitment to honor the dead. "How many others?" finally managed to ask. "Survivors from the escape pods," replied. "Some lived long enough to reach habitable worlds. They established colonies, had families, tried to rebuild their shattered civilization. But some of us could not let go, could not rest while our dead remained unremembered." He gestured toward the orbital vessel. "We are the Vigil, 12 souls who chose duty over rest. We have spent 3 years visiting every battlefield, every memorial, ensuring that all who died receive proper honors." "But you're," struggled for words. "Dead, yes, but death is not an absolute boundary for humans. Our minds are stubborn things. When we commit to a cause, truly commit, not even the ending of biological function can stop us." Starlight eyes fixed on the memorial. "We made a pact as children of Earth. No soldier left behind, no sacrifice forgotten, no honor." The implications were staggering. If humans could continue functioning beyond death through sheer force of will, if their commitment to their comrades could transcend biological limitations. "What do you want from us?" asked. Stood slowly, his translucent form seeming to waver in the afternoon light. "Nothing more than we have already taken. Permission to honor our dead alongside yours. Recognition that courage exists on both sides of any conflict." He began walking back toward his shuttle, but paused at the memorial's edge. "The war is over, Commander. We hold no grudges against those who fought honorably. But our duty continues until every fallen soul receives proper recognition." As reached his craft, called after him, "Will you return?" "When necessary," replied. "There are many battlefields, many memorials. The Vigil's work is far from complete." The shuttle rose silently into the sky, rejoining its mother ship before both vessels folded space around themselves and vanished. Stood in the memorial plaza, staring at the new offering and trying to process what he had witnessed. A human soldier, dead for 3 years, continuing his mission through will alone. 12 survivors who had chosen eternal duty over peaceful rest. And somewhere in the galaxy, other Vigil members were visiting other memorials, ensuring that human sacrifice was remembered and honored. The war had created more than casualties. It had forged something unprecedented in galactic history. Human souls so dedicated to their cause that death itself could not stop them from completing their mission. Picked up the metal disc had left, studying its flowing engravings. The text was in the same archaic human script, but somehow he could understand its meaning without translation. "In memory of those who held the line. Their watches ended, ours continues." As the binary sun set over Prime, casting long shadows across the memorial plaza, found himself facing a truth that challenged everything he thought he knew about duty, honor, and the price of survival. The human insurgency was over, but the humans themselves had evolved beyond death into something even more formidable. Guardians of memory, keepers of honor, the eternal vigil. The Galactic Council chamber hummed with nervous energy as representatives from 17 species gathered for an emergency session. Commander stood before the assembled delegates, his report about the Vigil incident having created ripples of concern throughout civilized space. The holographic displays around the chamber showed memorial sites across 12 star systems, each marked with recent appearances of the mysterious human offerings. High Admiral and of the High Command leaned forward in his crystalline seat, his 4 eyes reflecting the harsh chamber lighting. "Commander's report raises disturbing questions about the true nature of human consciousness and their capacity for post-biological function. This vigil represents a potential threat that transcends conventional military response. Ambassador Ra of the Collective shifted her tentacles nervously. With respect, Admiral, the evidence suggests these entities seek only to honor their dead. They have shown no aggressive intent toward living beings. Yet, interjected General of the Draconian Republic, his scaled hide gleaming under the chamber lights. What happens when honoring the dead is no longer sufficient? What happens when these beings decide that justice has not been served? Activated his portable display, showing the collected data from vigil encounters across the sector. The pattern remains consistent across all incidents. Respectful memorial ceremonies, careful placement of offerings, no interference with local populations or military installations. Their behavior suggests a religious or spiritual compulsion rather than strategic planning. But the implications are staggering, Admiral insisted. If human consciousness can persist beyond biological death through sheer determination, what does that mean for the nature of conflict itself? How do you defeat an enemy that refuses to die? The chamber fell silent as the weight of that question settled over the assembled delegates. Throughout galactic history, death had been the ultimate limitation on military conflict. Populations could only sustain so many casualties before surrender became inevitable. But if humans could continue fighting beyond death. Dr. the Council's chief accessed her research files. I've been analyzing the energy signatures from vigil encounters. The readings are unlike anything in our databases. It appears these entities exist in a state of quantum coherence, maintaining consciousness through manipulation of subspace fields. Impossible, declared Professor of the Academic Coalition. Consciousness requires a physical substrate, neural networks, biochemical processes. What you're describing violates fundamental principles of biology and physics. Perhaps our understanding is incomplete, Doctor replied. Human neural architecture shows unique properties we dismissed as primitive during the war. Their brain structure includes quantum-coherent microtubules that might allow consciousness to exist partially in subspace. If traumatic death occurred while the subject maintained intense emotional commitment. You're suggesting that strong emotions can literally anchor human souls to reality. Ambassador Ra's tentacles writhed in disbelief. I'm suggesting that human psychology operates on principles we don't fully comprehend, Doctor corrected. Their capacity for self-sacrifice, their devotion to abstract concepts like honor and duty, their willingness to die for causes larger than themselves. These traits may have a quantum mechanical basis. Thought back to his encounter with Sargent, remembering the profound grief and determination that had seemed to warp space around the spectral figure. The entity I spoke with claimed that 12 individuals had achieved this state, survivors who chose duty over rest. 12, Admiral mused. A manageable number. Perhaps we can negotiate with them, establish protocols for their memorial activities that don't destabilize regional security. Or perhaps, General suggested darkly, we should consider them a continuing threat and develop countermeasures. Before anyone could respond to the Draconian's ominous suggestion, emergency alarms began echoing through the chamber. A communications officer rushed to Admiral and sighed, whispering urgent information. The Admiral's mandibles clicked in agitation as he processed the report. It appears, he announced to the chamber, that the situation has become more complex. Long-range sensors are detecting multiple human vessels approaching memorial sites throughout the sector. Not vigil craft, these signatures match known human military designs from the war period. The chamber erupted in concerned murmurs and clicking mandibles. Ambassador Ra raised a tentacle for attention. How is that possible? Human military capacity was eliminated 3 years ago. Unknown, Admiral admitted. But 17 vessels have emerged from deep space, each heading toward a different memorial site. Their approach vectors suggest coordination. Felt a chill that had nothing to do with the chamber's climate control. Admiral, I request permission to return to Prime immediately, if the vigil is somehow connected to this development. Granted, take a full investigation team and prepare for any contingency. As departed the council chamber, he couldn't shake the feeling that the galaxy was about to discover just how little they understood about human nature and the true cost of the war they thought they had won. The journey back to Prime took 8 hours, during which received increasingly disturbing reports from across the sector. The human vessels had not responded to communication attempts, maintaining strict radio silence as they approached their destinations. Most troubling of all, initial scans suggested the ships were crewed by living humans, not spectral entities like the Vigil. "How is that possible?" Lieutenant asked during the briefing aboard their transport vessel. "We accounted for all human survivors. The refugee camps were monitored, the scattered colonies identified and documented." Doctor consulted her analysis tablets. "Perhaps these are descendants of the survivors, children born in exile, raised on stories of the war and their ancestors' sacrifices." "But the ships," protested. "Where would refugees acquire military-grade vessels? The human manufacturing capability was completely destroyed." Studied the tactical displays showing the approaching fleet. The vessels were indeed of wartime design, but with modifications that suggested years of careful maintenance and upgrade. Perhaps they were never as defeated as we believed. As their transport entered the Prime system, they found the local space transformed. The mysterious human vessel that had delivered Sargent was still in orbit, but it had been joined by one of the newly arrived ships, a heavy cruiser showing battle scars and radiation damage consistent with long years in deep space. "Sir," the ship's communication officer announced, "we're receiving a transmission from the cruiser. They're requesting permission to dock with the orbital station." Replied immediately, "Unknown human vessels will not be permitted to." "Commander," Doctor interrupted, studying her translation console. "The transmission includes authentication codes, military designation, unit identity, mission parameters. This is Exodus Fleet Vessel Redemption, 3rd Human Colonial Expedition." Four eyes focused sharply on the display. "Exodus Fleet, we have no record of any human Exodus Fleet." "Because they never intended us to find one," came a new voice over the communication channel. The accent was distinctly human, but carried the authority of command. "This is Admiral Sarah, commanding the 3rd Colonial Expedition. I'm requesting permission to honor my nephew at your war memorial." The name sent shock waves through consciousness. The same family name as the spectral sergeant who had appeared at the memorial. "Admiral, explain your presence in space." "We are the children of the escape pods, Commander," Admiral replied. "The survivors you dismissed as non-threats. We've spent 3 years building new lives among the outer colonies, but we never forgot our duty to the fallen. When the Vigil found us, when they told us about the memorial services they had been conducting. You came home, finished, understanding dawning. We came to finish what they started. 17 ships, representing every human unit that fought in this sector. We bring proper honors for our dead, formal recognition of their sacrifice, and a proposal for permanent memorial protocols." Found himself facing a decision that would reshape interstellar relations for generations. The humans had not been eliminated. They had retreated, regrouped, and evolved. The Vigil's spectral ambassadors had found their scattered kinfolk and brought them home for a final reckoning. "Admiral," he said carefully, "your vessels are armed. This could be interpreted as an invasion." "Our weapons are defensive only," Admiral assured him. "We learned hard lessons about trust during the war, but we're not here to fight. We're here to close a chapter that should have ended years ago." On the orbital stations, watched as the human cruiser deployed small shuttles that began descending toward the memorial plaza. Each craft carried memorial wreaths, honor guards, and formal military protocols that had been preserved across 3 years of exile. "Sir," whispered urgently, "we should alert the defense fleet. This could be the beginning of a coordinated assault." But was remembering Sargent's words about courage existing on both sides of any conflict. The humans below weren't conquerors. They were mourners, coming home to honor their dead with the same reverence the Vigil had shown. "Stand down all weapons," he ordered. "Grant landing clearance to the human shuttles, but maintain full sensor monitoring." As human soldiers emerged from their craft and took positions around the memorial plaza, was struck by their bearing. These were not the desperate insurgents who had fought the guerrilla war. These were disciplined military personnel, honoring fallen comrades with precision drill and formal ceremony. Admiral herself led the honor guard, a woman in her 50s with steel-gray hair and eyes that held the same cosmic depth as her spectral nephew. She carried a crystalline urn containing soil samples from every world where human refugees had established new colonies. "Commander," she said as he approached the memorial, "thank you for allowing us to complete our duty. Our dead deserve to rest beside your own fallen warriors." "They were insurgents," replied, though his conviction was wavering. "Terrorists who attacked civilian targets." Admiral's expression hardened slightly. They were soldiers defending their homes against an occupation force. The expansion directive claimed 17 human systems without consent or negotiation. We fought to protect our families, our colonies, our right to exist. The words struck like a physical blow. In all the military briefings, all the strategic analyses, human motivation had been reduced to simple terrorism. But from Admiral's perspective, the humans had been the defenders, fighting for their survival against overwhelming odds. "The war is over," he said quietly. "Yes," Admiral agreed, "but the consequences remain. Millions died on both sides. The least we can do is honor them properly." As the human ceremony proceeded, watched Sergeant's spectral form materialize beside the memorial. The ghost smiled as he saw his aunt conducting the formal honors, his eternal vigil finally complete. "She kept her promise," the specter said too. "She said she would come back for us when it was safe. 37 years we've waited." 37 years? His mandibles clicked in confusion. "The war ended 3 years ago." Sergeant Starlight eyes reflected infinite sadness. "The war started 37 years ago, Commander. The expansion first encountered human colonies in 2187. We've been fighting for our existence ever since." The revelation shattered understanding of the conflict. What they had classified as a 3-year insurgency had actually been a multi-generational struggle for survival. Human resistance had continued for decades, culminating in the desperate guerrilla war that had finally ended in orbital bombardment and exile. "Why didn't we know?" he asked. "Because you didn't want to know," Admiral said, approaching from behind. "Acknowledging human sovereignty would have complicated your expansion plans. Easier to classify us as terrorists than face the reality of what you were doing to established civilizations." As the memorial ceremony reached its climax, something remarkable occurred. The vigil members began materializing around the plaza, 12 spectral figures representing the human dead who had refused to rest. But instead of the hollow, ghostly forms expected, they appeared solid, present, renewed. "Our watch is ended," Sergeant announced, his voice carrying joy instead of sorrow. "Our people have come home, our fallen have been honored, we can rest now." One by one, the vigil members faded away, their eternal duty finally complete. But before disappearing, each touched the memorial surface, leaving glowing handprints that seemed to merge with the crystalline matrix. The war memorial had become something larger, a monument to all who had fallen in the conflict, regardless of species or allegiance. Admiral turned to with an expression of profound relief. "We're going home now, Commander. Back to our colonies, our families, our new lives. But we wanted you to understand something important." "What's that?" "Humans don't hold grudges. We grieve, we remember, we honor our dead. But we don't seek revenge. The war is over. The killing is done. But the consequences, the lessons, the memories, the need for mutual understanding, those will continue long after all of us are gone." As the human fleet prepared to depart, stood in the transformed memorial plaza, studying the glowing handprints that now decorated the crystalline surface. The war had ended not with victory or defeat, but with understanding. The vigil had accomplished something remarkable. They had transformed a monument to military triumph into a shrine to shared sacrifice. The galaxy would never be the same. 6 months had passed since the vigil's final ceremony at the war memorials, and the galaxy found itself grappling with revelations that challenged everything civilized species thought they knew about consciousness, death, and the nature of war itself. The Galactic Council had established a special committee to investigate what they termed the human consciousness phenomenon, but their findings raised more questions than answers. Commander had been assigned as the primary liaison for ongoing human relations, a position that required him to travel frequently between memorial sites and the growing network of human refugee colonies. What he discovered during these journeys forced him to confront uncomfortable truths about the war his people had fought and won. On Vega 7, he found a thriving human settlement built into the ruins of an ancient mining operation. The colonists were descendants of refugees from the Rigel Station battle, survivors who had fled into the asteroid fields with nothing but emergency supplies and an unbreakable determination to preserve their culture. They had spent 37 years carving a new life from barren rock, developing technologies that even engineers found impressive. "We learned to make something from nothing," explained Doctor, the settlement's chief engineer. Her great-grandfather had been among the original refugees, and she carried his stories like sacred texts. When you have nothing left except your will to survive, you discover capabilities you never knew you possessed. The settlement's memorial garden honored not only the human dead, but also soldiers who had shown mercy during the war, instances of compassion that had been buried in official reports, but remembered in family stories passed down through generations. Stood before a monument dedicated to Captain, an officer who had allowed human evacuation shuttles to escape before destroying the Titan Station shipyards. "Your people aren't monsters," Doctor said quietly. "Individual soldiers on both sides often acted with honor even when their governments did not. That's what the Vigil understood. That's why they honored all the fallen." On 7, encountered something even more remarkable. Admiral Sarah had established what she called the Memorial Fleet, a collection of restored warships that served as mobile monuments to the fallen. Each vessel maintained a crew of volunteers who had dedicated their lives to preserving the memory of those lost in the conflict. "We're not military anymore," explained Captain Torres of the Memorial Ship Remembrance. "We're historians, archivists, keepers of stories that might otherwise be forgotten. Every name on every memorial has a story, and someone needs to remember those stories." The memorial fleet traveled throughout human space, conducting ceremonies at battlefield sites and maintaining the network of monuments that honored both human and alien dead. Most remarkably, they had begun hosting joint ceremonies with other species, families honoring relatives lost in border skirmishes, draconian veterans seeking closure from their own conflicts. "War is a universal experience," Admiral told during one such ceremony. "Grief is a universal language. By honoring our enemies alongside our own fallen, we acknowledge their humanity while preserving our own." But the most disturbing discovery came on 9, where found evidence of ongoing vigil activity. Local colonists reported of spectral figures conducting memorial services at the site of the station massacre, the war's single bloodiest engagement. According to survivors, these entities were different from the 12 who had achieved closure, newer manifestations, recently deceased humans who had died with unresolved grief. "It started about 2 months ago," reported Mayor Jackson of New Haven Colony. "Residents began seeing figures in the ruins of the old research facility. They're not threatening, but they're clearly disturbed about something. They seem to be searching for specific individuals." Investigated the site with Doctor and a team of. What they found challenged everything they thought they understood about the vigil phenomenon. These new entities weren't war veterans refusing to rest. They were civilians who had died naturally, but couldn't find peace due to unresolved connections to the war. "They're looking for family members who died in the conflict," Doctor explained after analyzing the spectral manifestations. "Parents who never learned the fate of their children, spouses who never received confirmation of their partner's death. The trauma of uncertainty is keeping them anchored to the physical realm." The implications were staggering. If human consciousness could persist beyond death when driven by unresolved emotional trauma, the galaxy might be facing an escalating phenomenon. Every war, every conflict, every unjust death could potentially create more vigil entities seeking closure. "We need to contact Admiral immediately," decided, "if the humans have developed protocols for dealing with these manifestations." The meeting took place aboard the Memorial Ship Remembrance, in a chamber decorated with holographic displays showing thousands of names from both sides of the conflict. Admiral listened to his report with growing concern, her expression reflecting the weight of responsibility she carried as the facto leader of human diaspora. "The guidance protocol," she said after careful consideration. "It's something we developed after the original vigil made contact. We suspected other manifestations might occur." She activated a holographic display showing a complex ritual involving psychic resonance chambers, meditation techniques, and what appeared to be quantum mechanical equipment. "Human consciousness exists partially in subspace even during life. Strong emotional trauma can create quantum entanglements that persist after biological death. The guidance protocol helps these entities resolve their connections and find peace." "You're talking about ghost therapy," Doctor observed with scientific fascination. We're talking about healing trauma that transcends physical existence, Admiral corrected. The original Vigil members achieved resolution through completing their duty. These newer manifestations need different forms of closure. Over the following weeks, joint human teams implemented the guidance protocol at sites across the sector. The process was emotionally harrowing for all involved, as spectral entities shared their unresolved pain and traumatic memories with living counselors. But gradually, the tormented souls found peace and faded into whatever realm awaited them beyond death. During one particularly intense session on Altair 4, found himself serving as a communication medium for a soldier who had died with guilt over civilian casualties he had accidentally caused. The experience of sharing consciousness with the dead warrior's regret and shame left emotionally drained but profoundly changed. "I understand now," he told Admiral afterward. "The war didn't end when the shooting stopped. It continued in the hearts and minds of everyone it touched, living and dead." "That's why the memorial work is so important," Admiral replied. "Remembrance isn't just about honoring the past. It's about healing the wounds that would otherwise fester across generations." The success of the guidance protocol led to an unexpected development. Other species began requesting assistance with their own unresolved spiritual manifestations. The Draconian Republic reported ancient warrior spirits haunting battlefields from wars fought centuries earlier. The collective discovered that their telepathic abilities had been unconsciously suppressing spectral manifestations that suddenly became visible using human detection techniques. "We've opened a door," Doctor observed during a scientific conference on the phenomenon. "Human emotional intensity and quantum consciousness have revealed aspects of death and afterlife that other species never detected." The galactic community found itself facing a new frontier of understanding. Death wasn't the absolute boundary they had assumed. Consciousness could persist when driven by powerful enough emotions or unresolved trauma, and humanity's unique psychological makeup made them natural bridges between the world of the living and whatever lay beyond. But this revelation came with responsibilities. The memorial fleet expanded to include ships and crews from multiple species, creating the galaxy's first organization dedicated to spiritual healing and historical reconciliation. Memorial sites became pilgrimage destinations where beings from across the galaxy came to confront their own traumas and find closure. Most significantly, the discovery led to fundamental changes in how wars were conducted. The Galactic Council established new protocols requiring formal accounting of all casualties, proper notification of families, and memorial services that honored fallen enemies alongside friendly forces. The idea of total war became morally unthinkable when everyone understood that unresolved deaths could create persistent spiritual problems. The vigil changed everything, reflected during a ceremony at the transformed Prime Memorial. The crystalline monument now bore the names and handprints of fallen warriors from dozens of species, serving as a testament to the universal nature of sacrifice and loss. Admiral stood beside him, her hair now completely gray, but her eyes still holding that cosmic depth that seemed to see beyond the physical world. They completed their mission better than they ever imagined. Not only did they ensure our dead were remembered, they taught the galaxy to remember all the dead with equal honor. As the ceremony concluded, notice something that would have seemed impossible months earlier. Spectral figures from multiple species stood alongside the living mourners, not trapped between worlds, but visiting voluntarily to participate in the memorial service. The boundary between life and death had become permeable, allowing healing and closure to flow in both directions. The war was truly over, but its legacy had become something beautiful, a galaxy-wide commitment to honoring all life, remembering all sacrifice, and healing all wounds, whether carried by the living or the dead. The vigil's watch was ended, but their influence would continue for generations, ensuring that no one who died in service to their beliefs would ever again be forgotten or dishonored. 5 years had passed since the vigil's first appearance at the Prime Memorial, and the galaxy had transformed in ways no one could have predicted. The discovery of persistent human consciousness had triggered what historians now call the Great Reconciliation, a fundamental shift in how civilized species approached death, memory, and the aftermath of conflict. Commander, now promoted to Director of Memorial Affairs, stood on the observation deck of the newly commissioned vessel Eternal Vigilance. watching as construction crews put finishing touches on the largest memorial complex ever built. The monument of universal sacrifice orbited the neutron star that had once been Sol, humanity's birth system, destroyed during the early phases of the expansion centuries before the recent conflict. The memorial complex was a marvel of collaborative engineering. Crystalline technology provided the monument's translucent framework, while human quantum consciousness research had created chambers where the living could safely commune with spectral entities. Biotechnology maintained the living memorial gardens that honored the organic nature of life, and draconian metallurgy had forged the imperishable record tablets that would preserve individual stories for. "The final section is being installed now," reported Chief Engineer, his mandibles clicking with satisfaction. "The Chamber of Unfinished Business will be operational within the hour." Nodded, studying the construction through the reinforced viewport. The chamber represented the most ambitious aspect of the memorial project, a space where spectral entities with unresolved trauma could work with living counselors to find closure and peace. The technology required precise quantum field manipulation to create a stable interface between different states of existence. "Any word from the memorial fleet?" asked. "Admiral's ships are en route from the outer colonies," replied. "She's bringing representatives from all 17 refugee settlements for the dedication ceremony, estimated arrival in 6 hours." The dedication ceremony would mark more than just the opening of a memorial complex. It represented the culmination of 5 years of unprecedented cooperation between former enemies. The human refugee colonies had grown into thriving civilizations that contributed advanced consciousness research and spiritual healing techniques to the galactic community. In return, other species had shared their own technologies and resources, helping humanity rebuild from the devastation of their scattered diaspora. But the most remarkable development had been the emergence of what researchers called the spectral network, a galaxy-spanning community of conscious entities who existed primarily in subspace, but could manifest in physical reality when needed. These beings served as mediators, historians, and guardians of memory, ensuring that the lessons of past conflicts were never forgotten. "Director," came an urgent voice over the communication system. "We have an incoming transmission from the Andromeda Deep Space Observatory. Priority classification. They've detected something significant." Made his way to the communication center, where Doctor was analyzing data streams from the distant observatory. Her compound eyes reflected concern as she processed the incoming information. "What have they found?" asked. "Evidence of consciousness manifestation on a scale we've never seen before," Doctor replied, highlighting specific energy signatures on her display. "The Andromeda Galaxy appears to contain massive spectral entities, entire civilizations that have transcended physical existence but maintained coherent consciousness." The implications were staggering. If entire species could achieve collective consciousness beyond death, it suggested that humanity's vigil phenomenon was just the beginning of something far larger. The galaxy, perhaps the entire universe, might be inhabited by levels of existence that physical beings had never detected. "Are they attempting communication?" inquired. "Yes," Doctor confirmed. "The signals are being translated now, but preliminary analysis suggests they're aware of our memorial project. They're interested in our approach to healing post-trauma." Before could respond, the ship's quantum consciousness detection systems activated, alerting them to an incoming spectral manifestation. The familiar translucent form of Sergeant materialized on the bridge, but something was different about his appearance. Instead of the hollow, grief-stricken figure who had first appeared at the memorial, he now radiated a sense of purpose and connection that seemed to energize the entire space. "Director," said, his voice carrying harmonics that suggested he spoke for more than just himself. "The Vigil has received communications from the Andromeda entities. They're requesting permission to attend the dedication ceremony." "How is that possible?" asked. "Andromeda is millions of light-years away." "Distance has different meanings for consciousness that exists primarily in subspace," explained. "The spectral entities there have been watching our work with great interest. They represent civilizations that achieved transcendence ago, but have struggled with unresolved collective trauma from their own wars and conflicts." Doctor consulted her research data. "If these entities have been dealing with post-trauma for thousands of years without resolution, They might provide insights that could revolutionize our understanding of consciousness and healing. There's more, continued. The Andromeda entities aren't just observers. They're offering to share their knowledge of consciousness manipulation, technologies that could allow living beings to temporarily exist in spectral form. The potential for true communication between life and afterlife states could be revolutionary. Found himself facing another decision that could reshape galactic civilization. The Memorial Fleet had already demonstrated that humans possessed unique insights into consciousness and death. Now, they were being offered access to knowledge from civilizations that had existed beyond physical death for. What would they require in return? He asked. Inclusion in the Memorial Network, replied. They want to contribute their own unresolved traumas to the healing process. Even transcendent civilizations carry wounds that need closure. The dedication ceremony took place 3 days later, with representatives from 47 species gathering at the Monument of Universal Sacrifice. Admiral Sarah, now in her 70s but still commanding the Memorial Fleet, stood before the assembled delegates as the Memorial Complex achieved full operational status. "We gather here not just to remember the dead," she announced, her voice carrying across the vast memorial chambers, "but to acknowledge that death itself is not an ending but a transformation. The boundaries between existence and non-existence are more fluid than we ever imagined." As she spoke, the quantum consciousness chambers activated, revealing spectral entities from across the galaxy. The original Vigil members stood alongside newer manifestations, but they were joined by beings of impossible age and complexity. The Andromeda entities, manifesting across millions of light years to participate in the ceremony. One of the ancient beings stepped forward, its form shifting between crystalline structures and flowing energy patterns. When it spoke, the words seemed to emerge from the fabric of space itself. "We are the Remnant Council of Andromeda," the entity announced. "We have watched your species struggle with the aftermath of conflict for eons, but never have we seen such effective methods for healing the wounds that transcend death. We offer our knowledge to expand your memorial network across the galactic cluster." The ceremony that followed was unlike anything in recorded history. Living beings communed directly with spectral entities, sharing memories and trauma that spanned millions of years. The monument's consciousness interface chambers allowed for unprecedented levels of communication between different states of existence. Doctor worked frantically to record and analyze the data flowing through the memorial systems. "Director, the information exchange is extraordinary. We're receiving historical records from civilizations that died out before our species achieved sentience. The archive potential is infinite." But more important than the historical data was the healing taking place. Ancient traumas that had festered in spectral form were finally being addressed through the techniques developed by human consciousness researchers. Entire species that had achieved transcendence while carrying unresolved guilt and grief began finding peace for the first time in ages. "The network is expanding," reported Chief Engineer. "The Memorial Complex is establishing quantum links with consciousness nodes across 17 galaxies. The spectral entities are creating a permanent communication infrastructure." Watched through the observation ports as reality itself seemed to shimmer and expand. The Monument of Universal Sacrifice had become something far greater than a memorial. It was now the central hub of an intergalactic network dedicated to healing trauma across all levels of existence. Admiral joined him at the observation port, her expression reflecting wonder at what they had accomplished. "When my nephew first appeared at your memorial, I don't think any of us imagined it would lead to this." "The Vigil achieved something remarkable," agreed. "They proved that duty, honor, and love can transcend even death itself, but they also proved something else, that healing is possible no matter how deep the wounds or how long they've festered." As the ceremony concluded, the spectral entities began to fade, returning to their various states of existence. But the network remained active, pulsing with communication between living civilizations and transcendent consciousnesses. The galaxy, and now the galactic cluster, had become a unified community where the living and the dead worked together to preserve memory, heal trauma, and prevent the repetition of past mistakes. The original Vigil members gathered for one final manifestation, their forms now radiant with peace and purpose. Sergeant stepped forward, his starlight eyes reflecting infinite contentment. "Our watch is truly ended now," he announced. "The network will continue our mission better than we ever could. No one who dies with unfinished business will suffer alone. No trauma will go unhealed. No sacrifice will be forgotten." As the vigil faded for the last time, they left behind something beautiful. A universe where death was not an ending but a transition, where consciousness could find healing regardless of its state of existence, and where the living and the dead worked together to ensure that the mistakes of the past would never be repeated. The war that had started with territorial expansion and ended with orbital bombardment had ultimately led to the greatest advancement in galactic civilization's history. Humanity's stubborn refusal to let their dead rest dishonored had transformed the universe's understanding of life, death, and the persistence of love beyond all boundaries. In memorial chambers across 17 galaxies, beings of all species, living and transcendent, continued their eternal vigil, keeping watch over memory, healing trauma, and preserving the sacred truth that every life has meaning and every death deserves honor. The watch would continue forever, but now it was a watch of hope rather than grief, of healing rather than vengeance, of universal understanding rather than bitter remembrance. Humanity had taught the universe that some duties transcend death itself, and in doing so, they had made death itself a force for healing rather than ending. The stars themselves bore witness to this transformation, their light carrying the memorial network's messages across impossible distances, ensuring that no corner of the universe would ever again suffer in isolation. The vigil's legacy had become eternal, a beacon of hope that shone across all realities, reminding everyone that love, duty, and honor could overcome even the ultimate boundary of existence itself.